Hey, welcome back to a no-camera video because I was feeling pretty lazy for this one, not gonna lie. I adore Scott Pilgrim. I was introduced to the series when I was 12 or 13, and it's been a favorite of mine ever since. It's very much a product of its time, with the first volume of the series having been published in 2004, so some bits are a little bit wince-inducing in 2025, mainly regarding word usage, but I love it nonetheless. I love the original comics, obviously. I love the movie, despite a couple of the changes that it made not really gelling with me. I lost my mind at pretty much every second of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, in a good way.
Wow.
And I am most especially fond of the video game. The game was actually my introduction to the series, thanks to the Super Gaming Brothers Let's Play that was relatively new at the time. I saw them playing it, and it immediately grabbed my attention. I knew of the movie, I think because a friend at school mentioned having seen it one time, but the game was my first proper exposure to Scott Pilgrim. And once I learned about the comics after that, I went to the library, was genuinely amazed that they actually had all 6 volumes, and the rest is history. I've reread the comics many times since then, in original black and white and in color. Rewatched the film a bunch, I'm probably due for a rewatch of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, and I've played through the game more times than I can count. It's just something of a comfort series to me, something that I can go back to when I need a distraction or just when I'm bored. The game in particular ranks up there with Super Metroid and Gargoyle's Quest and a whole bunch of other games that I can play over and over again no matter what. So today, I want to pay tribute to this series by gushing about the game, since, like I said, it's where my love for Scott Pilgrim began. And it lines up well since we're finally getting another game next year in the form of Scott Pilgrim EX, which looks incredible by the way. Fuck yeah, playable Roxy. Also, the 15th anniversary of the game wasn't that long ago, which I totally knew and definitely planned on when I started this video. In no way was it a really good coincidence. This isn't really going to be an in-depth analysis or anything, not that I do much of that anyway. I just want to take a chance to talk about a game that I love to death. Alrighty, enough preamble. Let's dive into Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game. The game largely follows the story of the comics and movie, but if you're not familiar with those, then don't worry, this is a very story-light game, and it really doesn't matter. The game can be fully enjoyed if you've never read the comics or seen the movie, and it has so little plot itself that it isn't going to spoil very much if you decide to go to the source material afterwards. If you really need something to go off of, well, I already showed you the game's intro cinematic at the start of the video. Yes, that is a very basic setup, but like I said, story really doesn't matter much here because we've got a proper old-school style beat-em-up on our hands. We've had some slightly more story-heavy beat-em-ups in recent years, like the River City Girls games for example, but this game is very much a throwback to older titles like Streets of Rage and Final Fight, where pretty much all of your story came in the form of one cutscene before the game started. There are some short scenes after each stage, but they're barely worth mentioning here. They are very charming and feature some damn good pixel art visuals, especially the one at the end of stage 5, but we're not getting a bunch of lore here. The real meat and potatoes is obviously the gameplay, and it is damn good. Beat-em-ups can be a bit of a shaky genre in my experience. By their very nature, they're super repetitive, and you need to strike a delicate balance of stage length and a whole bunch of stuff, really, to keep things from getting stale too quickly. Scott Pilgrim largely nails this balance, in my opinion. The stages never feel like they're dragging on for an eternity, which even really good beat-em-ups can struggle with. Looking at you, Streets of Rage 4. Some stages definitely do vary in length. Stage 2 is like 4 minutes long, and the final stage in particular is about twice as long as every other level, though that one sort of makes sense given it's the end of the game and all. That said, it's worth mentioning that when you start the game, you might notice that it feels a little sluggish and awkward. Enemies take a lot of hits to go down, even really basic ones. You move super slowly, and these bigger enemies in particular do a lot to slow down the initial experience. It's not exactly a great first impression. Thankfully, if you stick with it, this does get remedied, as you'll likely have leveled up a few times just from the first level. Yes, you heard that right. You level up in this game. I suppose that's not super uncommon anymore. Lots of games, including beat-em-ups, have leveling up as a mechanic now, but at least for me, when this came out, that was almost exclusively a mechanic in RPGs, with a couple of exceptions. As you do, you'll unlock more moves for your chosen character, and your stats will increase, meaning you'll do more damage and, crucially, move faster. The difference between movement speed and damage from level 1 to the max level of 16 is like night and day. Or for a more extreme example, it's like the Arctic and the sun. Getting all the way to that max level doesn't doesn't take too incredibly long, and it actually does feel pretty good to steadily get stronger and faster. But if you find that initial slog is a bit too much and you want to cheese it, there is a super easy thing you can do in the first level of the game. Once you reach the second part of the stage, you'll want to head into this shop here and buy a chewing gum to go. Any food item that you can take to go will work for this, but the chewing gum is the cheapest, so that is the best one to use. Then you'll want to head outside and use the Noble Sacrifice code, which is one of these depending on what platform and version of the game you're playing. This will kill you, but it'll use up the gum instead of one of your extra lives to revive you. Grab the money that spills from your pockets, go back into the shop, buy another gum to go, then rinse and repeat until you've got about 650 bucks. Then you'll want to head back here to No Account Video, pay off Scott's late fees, and now you've got access to a bunch of stat and EXP increasing items. All of these can be useful in some capacity, but what we really care about here are the items Alone and Disturbed and 7 Shaolin Masters. Alone and Disturbed straight up gives you EXP, and 7 Shaolin Masters will boost your stats all across the board. By the time you've hit this part of the stage, you should be about level 3 already, so 13 Alone and Disturbed should get you to max level, but maybe double check in the pause menu because the game will let you keep buying them even after you're at maximum. After that, you want to grab 10 7 Shaolin Masters and your stats should all be at 100. Doing this takes like 10 minutes per character, so it's really not a big time sink at all. Again though, steadily getting better is pretty damn cool, on your first go anyway, so I'd suggest at least doing the first couple stages normally and then deciding if you want to use this method to grind out levels. If you'd rather not use that method and break the game over your knee like you were Bane, but you still want to level the playing field a little bit, then you can also head to Wallace's mystery shop in the first stage and grab the Bionic Arm, which boosts your strength stat by 50. You'll go from doing 2 to 4 damage per hit right into the double digits, so you won't need to wail on enemies quite as much. This item is a bit pricey for early game, but a couple of runs through the first level ought to give you the cash for it. Plus, going through the stage a couple times will almost certainly net you another couple of level ups. Or if you've hit the second or third stage before deciding you need some assistance, then you've probably got enough money for it already. Despite that kinda slow start, the game still feels absolutely great to play. The combat is on the simpler side. You've got combos and special moves and whatnot to spice things up, but it really isn't that deep. Fighting enemies is just so satisfying, man. Especially when you're powered up a bit and you can knock a guy so hard he flies across the screen. It just feels good. And it helps that you've got multiple characters to pick from to give you plenty of options too, and they're all pretty fun to play in their own ways. Scott's your standard all-rounder, not especially great in any particular area, but he'll give you a good grip on the overall feeling of the game. Ramona's on the quicker side and takes a little bit more damage. Kim is also fast and hits pretty damn hard. You're almost certain to find somebody that you gel with. Finishing the game with all 4 base characters, Scott, Ramona, Kim, and Steven Stills, will unlock Nega Scott, who you fight first as a boss in Stage 6, and for a long time he was my go-to character for this game. For the most part he's the same as Scott, but his specials hit real hard and it never gets old using that flying knee to knock an enemy into the fucking sun. Pretty much the only characters I don't personally enjoy playing as are Steven Stills and Wallace, because he's really just a reskin of Stills. Wallace was DLC back on the 360 and PS3 versions, by the way. $5 for a reskin with some animations that look like they're broken. Granted, that DLC also included the online multiplayer, but still. To be fair, Knives is also kind of a reskin, sharing a lot of similarities with Kim, but at least she has some stuff to set her apart. Wallace is straight up the same as Steven Stills. The only differences between the two are visual. Side note, Knives is kind of fucking crazy in this game. She starts out fun to play, if not too remarkable, but once you have her second special, you can really start doing some damage. This move lets Knives toss down 3 big kunai, which also explode, and at max strength do 30 damage each. With good enough positioning, you can hit an enemy with all 3 and do 90 damage, or you can just use it as a very solid form of crowd control. And since you're in mid-air, most enemies won't be able to hit you, and if you're in hyper mode, which you get by defeating 5 enemies in a row without taking damage, then you can keep spamming it and rise up until you're off the screen. Enemies also can't block this, by the way, so it's a really reliable method of dealing with enemies that like to block a lot. Even the final boss is vulnerable to this strategy. It's insane, and Knives might be my new main. Anyway, every character also has their own ending, ranging from basically the canon comics ending, like Ramona's, to very much not canon, like Scott and Nega Scott's. Even though they're all mostly just a couple lines of text, they're all pretty enjoyable. Although this is another area where Wallace gets the shaft. His ending is literally just this screen with no text whatsoever. Again, $5. It's very clear that they rushed him. In fact, if there's one overall issue with the game in my opinion, it's that it clearly wasn't given the time it needed to fully cook. It was released to tie in with the movie, and you can tell in some spots that affected the game. Entering shops can be pretty finicky, especially this one in Stage 6. It's got more than a few minor bugs, enemies will get stuck off screen sometimes, and the game freezing or crashing is something I've seen happen a few times in my years playing this game. Just for the record, I'm playing the Complete Edition re-release on Switch here, which definitely has some of its own bugs, but the OG release had its fair share too. I distinctly recall one time playing through the third stage on the 360 version and getting to the end of the level when Todd knocks you into the boss room, and the game just straight up soft-locking on this screen. The music kept playing, it wasn't like the game just froze or anything, it just never progressed. There's also this really fun bug that I love to exploit that I'm pretty sure is only in Complete Edition. At the very least, I never experienced it on the original version of the game. When you go into Stage 5's boss arena to fight the Katayanagi twins, you can actually start fighting them while their intro cutscene is going on. It's entirely possible to straight up defeat them during this, which is hilarious to me. I hope they never fix this. There's some general issues game design-wise too, such as having a few annoying enemies that'll cause you some trouble even at max level. For example, there's these paparazzi guys in Stage 2 who just love to stun you, and since they come in pairs, you'll usually get stunned, recover, and then get stunned by the other one. And just about any enemy who's capable of blocking, if they're feeling especially irritating and want to do their best impression of a Yakuza 3 mook, will just never stop blocking. It's a real pain in the ass when you get comboed too, because there's nothing you can do about it until the enemy's combo runs out. You do unlock a counter through leveling up, but I find it to be super unreliable and really particular with the timing. Stage 5 decided that there needed to be some platforming in the final section of the stage for some reason, which is super awkward because this game's really not designed for this kind of thing. Jumping is pretty stiff, which is negligible during combat, but here it makes it very easy to miss a platform and fall into the spikes. The double jump that you unlock from leveling up can help a little bit, but it's still not a great section overall. Luckily, it's pretty short, but it is very annoying. So it is not a flawless game, but I'm more than willing to put these issues to the side because, like I said, it's just a lot of fun to play. Plus, you can at least help deal with some of the more irritating enemies with your strikers, which are basically assists that you can call down at any time by pressing the left shoulder button. Most everybody has their own unique one. Usually it's Knives coming down to attack enemies with Love Smoke, or giving Ramona coffee to get right into hyperstate, which is awesome to have on demand like that. I say Knives is usually the striker because, well, Knives herself is a playable character, and she can't exactly call herself down, so when you're playing as her, she'll call down her mom to shout Chinese profanity at enemies. Speaking of, something that I learned while making this video, and apologies ahead of time if I get any of this wrong, I don't speak Chinese at all. Apparently this literally means grass mud horse, but it's also wordplay that sounds really similar to a Mandarin phrase that pretty much means fuck your mother. I can't immediately think of another game where you have an assist that tells enemies that, so that's pretty damn amazing. And that's not even all the strikers either. At some point you probably will notice this guy on the world map just sort of hanging out. This is Knives' dad, Mr. Chow. If you go over to him, you're gonna immediately get launched into a fight with him. And if you beat him, which might be easier said than done depending on your level and just how prepared you are, you'll unlock him as a striker. You can't play as him, he's specifically just an assist character. He has a chance to show up whenever you call down your striker, and he's absolutely insane. He'll teleport all over the screen, one-shotting any enemy that isn't a boss. You obviously can't count on him showing up, but when he does, oh boy is it a treat. It seems like he's more common when you're playing as Knives, but I've got no clue if that's actually the case or if it just feels that way. Nega Scott even has his own unique striker in the form of Nega Knives, who acts sort of like a less powerful version of Mr. Chow, going around to whack a few enemies. She won't hit every single enemy, but she does deal a shitload of damage, and if a bunch of enemies are close by, then she will hit all of them. So yeah, she's pretty helpful. Using your strikers costs guts points, which is the blue number below your health, so you can't spam them, but they can help you out a good bit in a pinch, especially if Knives' dad manages to show up when you're surrounded. And if you want to spice up the game even more, then there are cheat codes. Yes, though they're something of a lost art now, this game originally came out when we still sometimes got cheats in games, and there's some pretty neat ones here. Most of them are pretty minor, like unlocking the sound test in the world map, adding blood a la Mortal Kombat on Genesis, or turning all of the coins enemies drop into animals, but there's one that really stands out. On the title screen, simply input this series of buttons depending on your platform of choice. Thank you, Scott Pilgrim Wiki, for listing all of these out. And you'll be given the Power of Love sword at the start of every level. Huey Lewis smiles upon thee. If you've ever played Symphony of the Night, the Power of Love is basically like the Chrysogrim in that game. Absurdly powerful, and if you've got it, you can pretty much steamroll the whole game with zero effort. There's a reason this sword is normally only available during one section of Stage 7. Hell, even using the code, you still won't have it available for the final boss. Using this code is its own kind of fun, but I definitely suggest beating the game normally before you mess around with this, since it does remove pretty much all of the challenge from the game. It's also worth mentioning that the game has multiplayer, both online and offline, but I am desperately lonely these days, so I don't have any multiplayer footage. I did play some offline multiplayer with a friend back on the 360, and it's very much a good time. Online was a bit jank, but it mostly works. Now, that is about it as far as gameplay goes, but I am so not done yapping yet. You've certainly noticed the game's visuals by this point, and they are absolutely incredible. I recall several reviews and just users in general at the time describing this as an 8-bit game for some reason, but this is 16-bit style goodness through and through. Obviously, it's not a true 16-bit game. I'm pretty sure a Genesis or a Super Nintendo would straight up melt if you tried to play this on there, but it evokes the feeling of that era of games very, very well. This is among the pinnacle of retro-styled games to me. Even 15 years later, I'm still just kind of in awe of how good this game looks. Obviously, we've had many, many very good-looking 8 and 16-bit style games since this released, but I've rarely found one that hits me in the same way. The environments are all so varied, the color palette is always pleasing, it's a treat to look at. I want to specifically mention stages 1 and 6, or at least the beginning of stage 6, which are quintessentially wintry to me, not going fully into video game snow level territory like, say, Vendrana Drifts, but instead feeling very much like regular winter in an actual town. Though the series, and by extension the game, takes place in Canada, Toronto specifically, where I've never been, these two levels feel very much like places I have lived in. I was living in Jackson, Wyoming when I first played the game, and the town in winter looked very much like this. Even now, just looking at the game brings me back to that small-ass apartment I lived in, literally connected to a bar, and dealing with some shitty loud-ass band playing until way too fucking late, and it just makes me smile. Yes, it is absolutely nostalgia, but frankly, I don't care. Plus, there's a ton of references to the source material crammed into pretty much every stage. Basically, every level has characters standing around in the background, and most of them are from the comics. Lisa Miller shows up in Stage 2, with a different hair color admittedly, but still. Scott's barely mentioned brother shows up a couple of times. Wallace's boyfriend Mobile not only gets a couple of cameos in stages, but also runs a shop in Stage 6 where you can get the second special attack for your character. And even Knives' friend Tamara, who really was not important in the comics, gets a little cameo in the boss arena of Stage 1, among other places. In the absence of story and cutscenes, it actually helps make it feel like the story is still playing out around you, even though you're not really seeing most of it. In particular, when you're fighting Super Gideon Graves in Stage 7, there's a whole gathering of characters from the series standing by and watching the battle. It's pretty cool. Also, just something I noticed in this scene, why are Scott's parents standing so far apart from each other? Weird little detail that I don't know why I noticed. These little nods obviously won't mean much to people who were just playing this as a good beat-em-up without knowing anything else about the franchise, but if, like me, you are a big fan, it almost becomes a whole other kind of game just trying to see how many different references you can spot and trying to see who's who and what's what. And even if you don't know the exact references, it helps the game world feel a little bit more alive, so either way it works. Besides, there's still plenty of references to find if you're just a big fan of video games, which I sort of assume you are if you're going to play this. I'm not going to go over a whole bunch of them since I'm not trying to make this into a 50 references you didn't spot in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the game, so here's just a couple that I dig. In Stage 6, there are these little elf dudes you can beat the hell out of to get some extra cash, which are a pretty clear reference to Golden Axe. The animations that play for each character when you leave a stage shout out games like Kirby and Mario. In Wallace's Mystery Shop, you've got items like Speedy the Porcupine and Neverending Fantasy, which are pretty obvious references to Final Fantasy and Sonic the Hedgehog, and if you know me, you know I really appreciate that Speedy the Porcupine item. I also think the Bionic Arm could be a Bionic Commando shoutout, but it could just as easily be generally referring to, you know, the concept of a bionic arm. And finally, in stages 5 and 7, you can see this guy hanging out in the background. If you don't recognize who this is, I don't exactly blame you. This is Billy Big Bang Blitz, the main character of the NES game Clash at Demon Head. Said game is also the inspiration for the in-universe band that Scott's ex-girlfriend Envy sings for, the Clash at Demon Head. Evidently, author Brian Lee O'Malley has a soft spot for this game. There's obviously way more to be found scattered throughout, but those are the ones that I personally find the most amusing. These elements can be seen as a bit pandery, but I personally love them. They just add more to the charm of the game, especially the obscure ones like Billy Blitz. Hell, there's even a reference reference in the game's soundtrack with Lucas Lee's amazingly titled theme, Skate or Live, a pretty clear play on the NES game Skate or Die. Speaking of which, the music is the last thing that really rounds out the whole package for me, the cherry on top, if you will. The band Gushing was responsible for the soundtrack, and to this day, it's still one of my absolute favorite game OSTs of all time. Much like, say, Hideki Naganuma's incredible contributions to video game music, I've yet to really hear something that sounds quite like this game's soundtrack. Yes, obviously there are 28 trillion games with chiptune music, but there's a particular sound to Scott Pilgrim's tunes that nothing else has nailed. Between you and me, even most of Anamanaguchi's own work doesn't quite hit me like this. Now, I've said before that I'm not a music expert, so it's tough to truly put it into words for me, but it's just a very unique sound, at least to my ears. Every single song is a total banger. There's not even a single kind of okay song to be found. They're all incredible, and like the visuals, immediately take me back to when I first played the game. I could very easily gush about every single song here, and I would have no qualms about playing sections from all of them, but I'll just spotlight some of my favorites in the interest of time. The first stage theme, Another Winter, is probably the quintessential song from the game. It tends to be the one that comes to mind when I think of it, and Scott Pilgrim in general, really. Cheap Shop is another favorite of mine. It's right up there with Buy Something Will Ya from Earthbound as the perfect shop theme. I constantly end up humming this song when I'm in a story in real life and even in other games. The world map theme is one I like a lot too. Sometimes I'll just boot the game up and leave it on this screen to let the song play in the background while I do other stuff. The theme for Stage 6, Leave the Past Behind, just might be my favorite in the game. It's got this kinda somber sound to it, at least at the start, and even the rest of it isn't quite as upbeat as the other songs in the game. Even still, it feels good to listen to. Ooh, and also in Stage 6 there's the Dark One, which is the boss theme for Scott. It's this corrupted, glitchy version of the game's main theme, and it sounds so fucking sick, dude. Plus there's Rox 3000, the boss theme for Roxy, which I love even more ever since Scott Pilgrim Takes Off turned her into my favorite dork. Just like in the movies, which is the theme for Stage 2, Suburban Tram, Maquia, Vegetable Rock, like I said, I could go on and on, but I really have to stop myself there or I am just gonna go over every single song. Suffice to say, the soundtrack fucking rules, and I often throw it on when I'm out on a walk or just want to jam out. Hell, I've used it as background music for my videos many a time. I consider using it in pretty much every video that I make, whether it makes it in there or not. I've listened to it, I don't even know how many times, I never get sick of the soundtrack, and if my life had a soundtrack, I'd want it to be pretty much this. So yeah, I think I've made it pretty clear that I love this game to death, and if not, then I don't know how I can make it any more obvious. It may not be the best beat 'em up ever made, It's kinda jank. Later games in the genre are a bit more involved in terms of their combat and other aspects, but it is my favorite beat-em-up. I've played many good ones since this game came out. River City Girls 2 in particular is great. I love Shredder's Revenge, and despite my dig at it earlier, Streets of Rage 4 is also really solid, but I've yet to find a beat-em-up that I love to play and revisit anywhere near as much as this. Hopefully next year's Scott Pilgrim EX scratches that itch. It looks like it might. And even if it doesn't quite nail it, you bet I'm gonna be talking about it. It might just be 40 minutes of me going, but I am going to talk about it. Thanks for sticking around and listening to me yap about a game that I really love like this. That's going to be it from me. I hope you all have a good day, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is for you, and I will see you guys next time.